The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Another big investment in electric vehicle manufacturing this week begs the question, is Ontario now poised to be a global EV leader? We'll get a read on that tonight. Then our Ontario Hub's report on how the Bank of Canada decides whether to raise interest rates. And from combating labor trafficking to the resilience of libraries, we've got the Agenda's Week in Review. It's Friday, March 17th, and that's all coming up on the agenda. By 2035, all new cars and trucks sold in Canada must be zero-emission vehicles. And announcements like the one this week that Volkswagen will open a new battery facility here indicates Ontario's auto sector is gearing up to be a major player. With us now for a look at electric vehicle manufacturing in this province, Brendan Sweeney, Managing Director of the Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing. And Fatima Syed, Ontario reporter for the Narwhal. Hi.
Hi.
You two are a good-looking bunch. Before we get into the details, I just wanted to give some background on what's happened this week. Volkswagen, Europe's largest automaker, will establish an electric vehicle battery manufacturing facility in the small municipality of St. Thomas in southwestern Ontario. It will be their first overseas battery plant. Production is set to begin in 2027. Official numbers haven't been released yet, but Canada's Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association think it will result in 2,500 direct jobs. In the last 3 years, Canada has attracted more than $17 billion in investments from EV automakers and their battery suppliers. There's been a lot of excitement and news, both on the federal and provincial level about this news. So I wanted to get from both of you, how big is this announcement? Fatima, I'll start with you.
I mean, it's a big deal for Volkswagen to pick Ontario as their first overseas manufacturing plant hub. So that is definitely exciting. But for me, I'm a little hesitant and cautiously optimistic because we don't have details of the deal yet. And what we've seen over the last several months is like a bonanza of battery plant announcements with very little information beyond just a price tag. You know, we're currently in a climate where south of the border, we've got the United States offering a lot of subsidies and incentives to set up EV production facilities. We're not understanding fully yet what the Canadian and Ontario governments are promising these companies or assurances, what assurances are being given to bring them here. And so without those details, I can't give a full analysis, right? So I'm waiting on them, and then I can make a final judgment.
Well, we're going to get into some of those details with you both in just a moment. But Brendan, how big is this announcement?
It's absolutely massive. In and of itself, the plant in St. Thomas, just south of London, is going to be a major boon for the economy, and particularly in a community that about 12 years ago lost its only assembly plant. So massive economic gain for that particular part of Ontario. Volkswagen choosing Ontario over, it looks like, Oklahoma, is really huge because it's great when we get the reinvestments from incumbent manufacturers, but that a new manufacturer without a lot of experience manufacturing in Canada has chosen Ontario, has chosen St. Thomas as a location. That's a really great indication that we're competitive for these types of investments and that our automotive industry has a bright future.
Well, you mentioned the jobs aspect, but I think a concern that's come up is the repercussions to the environment, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But the why, I guess, you know, this plant could have been built in Mexico, it could have been built in the US. Why did Volkswagen choose a small town in Ontario, St. Thomas, for their first overseas electric battery plant? Brendan?
Sure, the land. You need land if a plant's going to go anywhere, and so that land that was assembled was kind of a sine qua non factor. I think the workforce. St. Thomas is a short drive south of London, which has 400,000 people. It's near Tillsonburg, Ingersoll. That labor shed for the plant will reach as far as Chatham on one side, Stratford in the north, Brantford on the other side. And this is a workforce that knows the automotive industry, that is very experienced with work in these big industrial facilities. You've also got a great network of colleges and universities that I think Volkswagen can rely on to train some new occupations, particularly around chemistry, that folks who are going to end up working in that plant, and particularly in higher paying occupations.
Fatima mentioned, this is there's a lot of money, a lot of details that we still need to get. The provincial and federal government won't admit how much money they offered Volkswagen for this deal. So Brendan, can you give us a sense of what that number might be?
Probably the minimum boundary now is going to be around 25% of the total investment, and we're looking at...
How much money is that?
That's going to be 25% of at least $5 billion.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but that is kind of table stakes for winning these investments now. These are anchor investments. This plant probably has a 40-year time horizon.
But are those Volkswagen's, I guess, terms?
They would likely be Volkswagen's terms. No one's going to invest anywhere in North America without these types of investment incentives. And unless they invest in Mexico, where wages are $2 an hour.
Fatima, inflation, people are really worried about their jobs. Money is tight. And what do you think about the idea that our governments are likely handing over hundreds of millions in taxpayer dollars to a foreign car maker?
I think that's the big question, right? What we've heard in the days since the Volkswagen announcement was made is, Ontario has everything that a company like Volkswagen would want to set up a battery facility. We've got minerals, we've got clean power, and we've got the workforce that Brendan was talking about. The problem is that we're being sold on this vision that isn't reality yet.
What do you mean by that?
So I think the government has been pitching to Ontarians and to Canadians that this province is uniquely set up to be to build an EV supply chain from start to finish. We have the minerals in Northern Ontario, and we can use those minerals to refine them. We can build the battery plants, in Windsor, in St. Thomas, and then we can turn them into cars and sell them across the world, right? So it all happens in Ontario.
It sounds great.
It does, but it's complicated too, right? Because we don't have those minerals yet. We don't have access to them yet. We're still trying to figure out how to get to them, how to, we're still talking to Indigenous communities who are saying that, any mining in this area will be irreversible in terms of its impacts on our communities and our ways of life. Even the EV battery plants are still a few years out from being built. There's a trade-off there, right? The Volkswagen plant is going to be built on farmland. Are we thinking about, how do we supplement that loss of agricultural land in a time when food security is such a big deal? And then when we get to Windsor and the actual operation of the plants, are we supporting the community? Are we creating a labor supply chain where we have kids in universities who are actually being trained to work in those plants eventually? Is this a 100-year plan where the supply chain is going to sustain itself and Ontario at the same time? It's such a big, complicated picture. And right now, all we have is a couple of press releases saying that it's happening. We have these companies coming. They're going to set up in the next few years. Great, but what about the rest of it? How will this actually provide benefits to Ontarians? That's a question I haven't received an answer to that I'm satisfied with yet. Mm-hmm. So, again, devil's in the details, and we're waiting to learn more.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Fatima. Brendan, just to build on what Fatima was saying, the Ford government would like to see these minerals mined in Ontario, refined in this province, and the batteries built in Ontario as well. Is it realistic to expect this in the next 5 years when this plant opens its doors?
For mines to be online? Probably not. There's a real balance in Ontario. We have the minerals in the ground, but in most cases, we don't even have a road for going there.
Do we even know how much we have?
Enough to supply these plants for a long time. I think the challenge out ahead of us is bringing the mines online, but doing it properly, doing it responsibly, and certainly doing it in a manner, not just consultation with Indigenous groups, partnerships with folks who have some claim to these minerals up north. There's also and this is a little bit beyond my pay grade, but some of the locations where there are known mineral reserves, they're really hard to get to. They're hundreds of kilometers through a bog, through a swamp, and it will take some significant engineering feats to get there and to get there properly while minimizing any environmental impact.
I think you're talking about the Ring of Fire, and we're going to be talking more about that next week on the agenda. Fatima, how carbon intensive is it to build electric vehicles?
Oh, this is a question that is way above my pay grade. Now it's putting us on the spot. Look, EVs are great for the environment. We're in a province where transportation makes up a third of our emissions. So we definitely need electric vehicles to help reduce that amount of the pie chart. At the same time, I think when it comes to any decision to really, bring us the most benefits in an era of the climate emergency, we have to think about trade-offs, right? Are we using the best technology? Are we going for the best solution that will reduce the most amount of emissions in the most sustainable way and in a way that will help generations to come, right? This is not a present moment thing. This is a long-term, for future generations and generations to come. I think EVs have been poised to be that and can be that. The thing is, we also have this opportunity to do it from scratch and do it right. And that's where, I go to government ministers and I say, cool, you want me to celebrate the Volkswagen announcement, I get it, but tell me how. How does this fit into the ecosystem? And that's a question I don't have an answer to. It's all well that we're going to build a lot of batteries over the next few years, but how are we going to get Ontarians to buy those batteries, to incorporate those batteries into their day-to-day life? How are we going to translate those batteries into electric vehicles that Ontarians are also going to buy? I was in Windsor just yesterday where, one of the largest plants is going to be built. I struggled to find EV chargers. I struggled to find an EV on the road. So, how are we actually going to create that ripple effect or that domino effect, whatever metaphor you want to use, to go from having this apparently very cool factory, where details we still don't know, to, everyone's driving an EV, everyone's got battery technology in their house, and we have energy storage facilities across the country as well. How are we actually harnessing the good that comes from all of this?
You mentioned something about cost. I think my family's been trying to buy a car for the last year, and the supply chain can't find any. And if you're looking at electric vehicles, some of these numbers, like in BC, nearly 15% of new vehicles bought between January and June 2022 were electric. In Quebec, it was 11.4%. In Ontario, it was just 5.5%. Is it safe to say the idea of driving an electric vehicle has still not caught on in this province, Brendan?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to take a while, and we've got to convince a consumer who really likes 8-cylinder pickup trucks and large SUVs.
You're talking about the Ford F-150?
Ford F-150, Dodge Ram, you name it. We like pickup trucks in Ontario.
But EVs are expensive, no?
EVs are expensive, and the best way to bring the price down, to achieve affordability, is to make EVs at scale. We're not really making EVs at scale right now, and as we bring the production up, as we build that supply chain out, we'll achieve economies of scale, and that price will come down a bit, and hopefully a bit more than a bit. Hopefully the price will come down a lot, and that will hopefully happen as we're building out charging infrastructure, but it's not going to happen overnight. Nothing this complicated is going to happen overnight, and it would be really interesting if we do this in 5 years and see where we're at, and hopefully we are making good progress.
I don't think anyone would say they don't want to save money. Just to give you an idea of how much EVs are, Canadians purchase cars in the range of 35 to 40,000. EVs are still on the high end of that, 50 to 80,000. And you mentioned, having EV charging stations. Fatima, has Premier Ford made it easier or harder to get Ontarians behind the wheel of an electric vehicle?
Much harder, much harder. And you know, I've been car shopping too because I need a car, and I'm dealing with the same problem, which is, you know, I could spend a lot of money now, buy an EV, but I live in a city where charging infrastructure is very sparse. My building does not have a charging station at all. The nearest charging station is a 5 to 8 minute drive away. How do I contend with that, right? We have to remember, you know, what Brendan's talking about is the chicken and egg argument, right? Depending on who you ask, some people will say, okay, if we build the battery plants, EVs will come. Like that's going to be the chicken that brings the eggs, and we'll go from there. Others will argue that, well, if you don't even have charging infrastructure, if you're actually not implementing the things that people need to make EVs accessible and to, you know, incorporate them into their daily lives, how will the battery factory actually help, right? How will that, you know, translate into Ontarians' daily lives? My argument is that you have to have a holistic approach. And we, in Ontario, we have a government that when they first came to power, ripped out electric vehicle charging stations that were already implemented, cut the incentives that were already available for people to purchase EVs at a lower price, and we still don't have those replaced. Instead, what we have is, you know, a push to get manufacturers here to build batteries. And again, my question is, how does that help me? How does that help you? How does that help Ontarians buy an EV right now or in the next 5 years?
Not to put you on the spot, but in your view, why do you think the government or Premier Ford has made a turn on EVs?
I think it's financially beneficial. You know, it's a lot of money. We're talking about millions and billions of dollars with these companies setting up plants here. I think it's a lot of jobs, potentially, once we know how many exactly, at least with Volkswagen. And I think that for a conservative government, money and jobs is a good argument to make.
Tell me about Dieselgate.
Okay, so this is really interesting because it was only 4 years ago when the Canadian government fined Volkswagen with the largest environmental fine that any company has received in our country's history. Back in 2015, it was found that Volkswagen was producing cars that were marketed as being very emissions friendly and so forth. But when someone actually looked at the software, it was botching the results. So it was actually using more diesel than they said, and it was emitting a lot more nitrogen oxide, which is a dangerous pollutant, than they marketed. They were fined by many countries around the world, including Canada, in the billions, hundreds of billions, I would say. They had to compensate a lot of Ontarians and Quebec, folks in Quebec who bought these cars. And I asked the federal government how that case played into the conversation with Volkswagen, you know, with the recent announcement, and did not get a straight answer. So I have to wonder, what's the relationship here? Are we, you know, do we trust a company that only did that a few years ago and had to, you know, pay and fire a lot of people? A lot of people went to jail for that case. Do we trust that company to actually commit to helping us reach the clean, sustainable future we want?
And Brendan, I think that's a fair concern because it looks as if this company is being rewarded for wrongdoing.
It may be the case that they're starting to atone for that, or at least I'd hope that's the case by building 2 new electric vehicle plants, transitioning one internal combustion engine plant in Tennessee to another electric vehicle plant, and building what could very well be the largest EV
But do you think there
plant.
should be conditions built in to say that moving forward that they will do what they say that they're going to do?
I would hope that in whatever agreement that Volkswagen, the federal government, the provincial government come up with for this investment, that is included, and kind of expect that it will be.
Is there, I don't know, maybe like nervousness, because obviously we want that investment in the province, but is there a little bit of nervousness to kind of put those conditions on a company that might choose to go somewhere else?
Quite possibly, but I think we're pretty
Too far ahead?
We're pretty far ahead with this now, and this is, you know, a couple days away from, you know, officially being a realized investment where they put a shovel in the ground. So.
How many jobs do you think this will create?
I would say our theoretical minimum now is around 2,500, and it could be quite a lot more than that. If we talk about the spin-off benefits, that's really going to depend on how much Canadian content goes into those batteries. Are we, and that might be something we build out over the next 5, 10, 15 years. In the event, our theoretical, and we've done some modeling work with this, our theoretical maximum of that battery plant runs Canadian mined, Canadian refined minerals exclusively. We're looking at a multiplier of 12, which is just absolutely off the charts. More realistically, it's going to, in 10 or 15 years, it's going to run with some Canadian content, and we're anticipating, mid-2030s, the battery plant will have a job multiplier of somewhere between 6 and 8. That's also very high, where the automotive industry multiplier right now for vehicle assembly is about 4.5. So 6 to 8 is quite high, and that's another reason why this is such an important and exciting investment.
Those numbers are very encouraging. Fatima, I saw you nodding.
I think everything could be great if everything is done right. And for everything to be done right, we need a lot more transparency, we need a lot more details, and we need to fully understand how this is actually going to happen. Because all those jobs, all those people that are going to be moving to St. Thomas, they're going to need houses, they're going to need transit. There's going to be more people there, there's going to be more pollution there, there's going to be more environmental impact there. Are we thinking about all that? How are we going to address all of that? It's not as simple as, put an EV plant in St. Thomas and all of that city's problems are solved. There's a lot more difficult questions that come with an announcement like this than we are getting answers for.
And we all don't want those unintended consequences to negatively impact those communities, right?
Exactly, and we're running out of time, right? Like the climate emergency is speeding up in its impacts. We're seeing it every year with more severe weather impacts and so forth. We need change and positive, sustainable, long-term change. And to do that, we have to start now. I already feel like, especially with the Ontario government, with its early decisions on electric vehicles, we took 2 steps back. Now we've taken a step forward, and I would like us to keep moving forward. But again, I need to know the details, the plan, and I don't think we have that yet.
So you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the benefits and the workforce and the labor shed, it's going to be spread across Southern Ontario, and particularly St. Thomas is not the biggest city in Southern Ontario. London is one of the biggest cities in Southern Ontario, and if you take General Motors' assembly plant in Ingersoll, for example, probably a majority of the folks who work there live in London. Similarly, Ford's Oakville assembly plant, a small majority of the folks who work there live in and around Hamilton. So the workforce, they'll draw from St. Thomas. We'll need some new housing. I think we need new housing kind of everywhere these days. But they'll be drawing from London, from Tillsonburg, from parts west, from parts east, and I'm sure they'd love to draw from parts south, but they'll hit water about 10 kilometers down. So.
Well, we've got about a minute left. Small municipalities in Ontario like St. Thomas once thrived building gas-powered cars. Then the plants closed, jobs dried up, and they became part of Canada's Rust Belt. But with EV factories opening up here now, what should we be calling this part of Ontario? Fatima?
Oh, I don't know. The charged belt?
The
charged belt?
Yeah, what about a volt belt? We could maybe do the volt belt. So.
It sounds good to me.
There's just a lot of power there.
Yeah. Thank you to you both for helping us to understand this complex event. Hopefully, moving forward, we'll get more answers to the questions that you brought up. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
For the first time in a year, the Bank of Canada's most recent announcement didn't include raising interest rates. Kat Ashner is our Ontario Hub's affordability journalist. She's been looking into how the bank makes decisions like that, and she joins us now. Hello, Kat.
Hey, Jan.
All right, so you recently visited the Bank of Canada in Ottawa. This was interesting because the bank's media person told you that normally people don't get access to do stories about the inner workings of a bank. My first question is, how'd you get access?
So, to be fair to Paul Battercher, the bank's director of media relations who I spoke with, I did ask him. if I would have been able to get this access, say, 5 years ago. And he was like, I mean, it wouldn't have been a priority. And when I contacted them initially, being like, I would like to come to the bank and I would like to meet your staff and learn about the process of making monetary policy, which basically is setting interest rates. He was very receptive, and we managed to get something going. And I actually went into the bank and spent 2 days reporting from the bank. So this is kind of cool, but interest rates only have the desired effect on inflation, and we can only bring inflation down if people think we can. If people are expecting inflation will be about 2%, which is the Bank of Canada's target. If they're not convinced that's going to be true, and they sort of have this, what someone else I spoke with called entrenched inflationary psychology, where they just think interest rates are good, or where they just think inflation is going to be like 5% or higher for a long time. They behave as if that's true, so they make decisions around how they spend money, how they save money as if it's true, and it actually drives inflation. So recognizing this, like, the bank has put a lot of work into new ways of communicating with Canadians to, like, reassure them and explain to them exactly what they're doing, how it will bring inflation down, and why, for example, having to hike interest rates to levels that are frankly punishing for many Canadians, why it's necessary. Like, why are we making you do all this? And they really want to help people understand why exactly it is and what it is they do and how exactly it works. So I think that's why they were like, yeah, please come, please meet our people.
All right, with that being said, hopefully in basic terms, because I know you have all the lingo now, in basic terms, what function of the bank were you there to learn about specifically?
Yeah, so the Bank of Canada does a lot of stuff. Among other things, it makes all of Canada's currency. So, like, all the bills you see, literally, the Bank of Canada has a branch that just makes bills.
Okay.
But what I was there to learn about is called monetary policy. It's basically the process of manipulating the rate of inflation using a fairly simple series of tools, but the only big one is interest rates.
All right. Monetary policy has been described as boring sometimes. It is also interesting to note that we don't live in boring times, obviously. We are in a global pandemic, we have wars raging on. What did you learn about how monetary policy is made, with all of that noise sort of in the background?
Right. So the big takeaway I had from my time at the bank is that A, it's full of nerds, but B, those are really smart nerds who spend a lot of time thinking about all of these different facets of the Canadian economy. I met a few of these don't kill me, gentlemen. Don't be upset, but you're nerds. I know, I'm one too. It takes one to know one. They spend a lot of time thinking about everything from how the labor market is more diverse than it used to be, to like the different ways people have jobs are much more varied than they used to be when, for instance, Canada adopted inflation targeting, which is the system we use in 1991.
Right.
But they also think about new ways to use data, because they have a lot more data and a lot more information about, for example, Canadian households than they used to, just because computers are amazing, and computers in 1991 and computers in 2023 are, basically you're talking about two completely different things in some ways. So they spend a lot of time thinking about how to understand the economy, how to transition it, and they're always kind of retesting their hypotheses and ideas against other data, which I think has proved somewhat useful in these, I keep hearing the word unprecedented time. I don't know if there are precedents, unfortunately, but these very chaotic times. And that data is really something they rely on a lot.
All right, let's talk about sort of these quote-unquote nerds and sort of the various departments. How did the various departments of the Bank of Canada actually work together to make a decision like, hey, we are going to raise interest rates, or we're not going to raise interest rates?
Yeah. So this is actually really cool. Follow me on this journey.
Right.
Come inside the Bank of Canada with me. So, leaving aside all of the parts of the Bank of Canada that have nothing to do with monetary policy, that don't really interact with setting interest rates, who might come in at some point, maybe they have some need for one of those departments specifically, but in general, those departments are not involved. There are sort of four main departments that are involved with producing the data and the analysis that the Bank of Canada's Governing Council uses to set the interest rate. There's one that looks at the financial stability of Canada's economy and is always looking at threats and possible issues. I mean, you would be shocked to learn that housing and Canadians' indebtedness is very high on their list of concerns right now. There's one that does modeling and projections on the Canadian economy and sort of spends a lot of time just thinking about how the Canadian economy works from a forward-going perspective. There's another one that just looks at financial markets and sort of studies how financial markets impact the Canadian economy and what they might do. And there's another one that looks at the international context. So they look at everything from how U.S. actions could affect Canada to bigger geopolitical questions and all those things. So those 4 departments are all throughout every fiscal quarter, so every 3-month period. They're always sort of like producing and retesting new information and thinking about different things that could arise that would maybe need to be sort of foreseen in the interest rate announcement. And they produce all this data, and then they're involved in this series of like 8 meetings that I read about in my story, where they present like a first case sort of far out from the interest rate decision and from the release of the monetary policy report, which is the big thing that anchors the quarter. They provide like context in this case A meeting, and then for 2 weeks they do all kinds of other things. Then there's a case B meeting. There's like a more closer to the decision meeting, and throughout that they're just like producing things and also responding to governing council requests for information and for further analysis. Like for example, the governing council might be like, okay, well, can you tell us what might happen if the price of oil? I'm giving you a for example. This is not something they told me about, but if the price of oil skyrockets suddenly, can you tell us what might happen if that's the case?
Very interesting. Okay, something that you had talked about was sort of the role of computers, and I know when you were down there, you did spend a lot of time staring at some numbers and codes, and I'm curious, what is the role of computer modeling in setting interest rates?
The Bank of Canada has 2 main kind of models that the Canadian Economic Analysis Department uses to forecast and examine what might happen in the economy, and they're called Totem and Lens. Totem and Lens don't look like much. Like I saw both of these models. They are not exciting viewing, especially if you are not someone who understands modeling very well, which I'm not. But they use these 2 models in concert with a lot of other models and a lot of other information and something called judgment, where they sort of like think about what each model does, what each model can do, and how different variables within the model, so say the price of gasoline or the number of employed people or anything like that, how changes in those models might affect the future.
Okay.
So it's a process of informed judgment and also like this really high-tech, intricate, interesting computer modeling exercise.
Very interesting. Good relationship there. All right, last question for you. Canadians are carrying a lot of debt. What did the Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem reveal to you about how he views his responsibility as Canadians sort of struggle through as they make ends meet?
Right. So I met Tiff Macklem by accident. I met him when he was he was leaving for the day, and he was coming out of an elevator somewhere near where I was at the time. And we had a brief conversation, which was, it's in my story, but it was a very brief interaction. And then I sent him this email following up being like, okay, so you're where the buck stops. You're responsible for the governing council's decisions. And we know that, Canadians are feeling the impact of higher interest rates, especially with higher inflation. How do you think about your role here? And I received a response which is attributable to Macklem. I received it from the press person, Paul, who I'd been working with. And it sort of started by saying, I realize things are hard for Canadians. I read a lot of letters. I don't know when he reads them, but I read a lot of letters, and I can tell, I hear about these hardships. And the thing is, the Bank of Canada, so it gets its mandate via the Bank of Canada Act. Its mandate sort of comes from the federal government. It's a bit complex, but they only have a few tools they can use to affect inflation, which we all agree is inflation right now is bad. Right. Things are not good, especially in essential categories like food and shelter. Right. And those are hurting many people, but especially lower income Canadians and Canadians on a fixed income who can least afford to be hurt. They have the least wiggle room. And he sort of addressed all these points in his response to me. And then kind of said, but we're determined to bring inflation down using the one tool that they have to do that, which is interest rates. And we're going to keep doing whatever needs to be done to bring inflation down, even if that means raising interest rates, which impacts everyone, even there's more than a third of Canadians who don't own a home and thus don't have a mortgage. We are also all impacted by interest rates to some degree or another. So I think the thing is that he's gotten a lot of flack for decisions that have been made in the last year or two. And I'm not going to comment on any of that specific flack, but I do think it's worth knowing, and I do hope Canadians understand, Bank of Canada doesn't have a lot of tools, but they have this mandate, which is keeping inflation around 2%, low, stable inflation. And so they're going to use the tools they have to try and produce that outcome.
Kat, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so
Truly.
much for so much insight from Bank of Canada. Thank you again.
Thanks, take care.
The agenda this week assessed the state of democracy in Ontario, explored Canada's underground economy, and learned how libraries are adapting in this era of technology. The agenda's week in review begins with the problem of labor trafficking in this province.
The first thing to understand is that it's all legal, most of this. When we're talking about farm workers, for example, working without a break or 12, 14 hours a day, that's legal under Ontario labor law, right? When we're talking about theft of wages, people being housed in warehouses, again, that is part and parcel. And that's because the immigration law has created this fundamental power imbalance, not my words, Minister Carla Qualters, that makes it impossible for people to assert their rights. There's about 125,000 temporary foreign workers in the country, but there's 1.2 million people on temporary permits. And there's this, in our experience, for example, these workers that we just spoke about, they were being paid below $13 an hour. But now that the police is involved, they can't actually get their money back because it's the Ministry of Labour that controls getting your money back, right? It's
Ontario Ministry of Labour?
Ontario Ministry of Labour, and they're not involved. So when we start talking about things as trafficking versus labor exploitation, the police get involved, and we don't really, workers don't gain anything. And that's the fundamental issue. Workers need their wages back. We talked to these workers before the police raid, and some of them decided they didn't want to leave because at least they had a job. Now they've been housed for 2 months, as Loli knows. They're going to maybe get TRPs. They won't be renewed again.
TRPs?
Temporary resident permits, which won't be renewed, as Loli knows. And so we end up with this making it about trafficking takes away the fact that this is part and parcel of the immigration system, and the fundamental issue is lack of permanent resident status.
As you watch this issue, have you noticed an uptick more recently in the exploitation of workers?
Well, we can say that have been happening before. Now it's more like with the people, like the police now is learning that there is a labor trafficking. The labor trafficking had been happening a long time ago, especially with the immigration programs, because they come with a closed work permit. And you don't have a closed work permit working here with TVO, no? And like me, I work where I want, and it's the organization where I am. But they don't. They have to work for that employer. And that's the problem. It's immigration programs that they make them vulnerable to be exploited, because sometimes the employer is not a good employer, like we found, and then they come this recruiter and say, I will find you a better job, and they move them to another place. And at the moment that you change of job, you lost your work permit because you are breaking part of the contract that you need to work for that employer.
Let's just understand, Julia, because we want to understand how pervasive this is. Do we say that most employers are pretty good, but there are some bad apples, or is it worse than that?
So we really don't know, and part of it is because awareness is so low and people are not coming forward. It's about employers, and there's good ones and there's bad ones, but we also see exploitation taking place amongst peers and managers and various levels of kind of the management structure within these industries where you see large majorities of temporary foreign workers. So in our first year of operating the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline, about 6% of cases that we identified were labor trafficking cases, but that's really the tip of the iceberg. Like, we know that it's underreported, and part of it is also because it takes very unique, targeted outreach strategies to be able to connect with migrants because they're so isolated in our communities. Many are coming with language barriers. They're in rural and remote areas. They're reliant on their employer to transport them to places. And they're also not eligible for the same services as other permanent residents and citizens. So we've got a really robust set of programs and services for settlement, immigration settlement in Canada. They're actually not mandated to serve temporary foreign workers. So if we get a call on the hotline and someone's in an abusive situation and they want to be able to access housing supports or service navigation, there's a whole ecosystem of supports that categorically excludes temporary foreign workers, making them more vulnerable to exploitation and more reliant on their employers.
What countries typically are we seeing these workers coming to Canada from?
So we have about 2,000 members who are migrants just in agriculture, 35,000 in total. And they're coming from, in the agriculture sector, people are coming from Jamaica, from Mexico, from Philippines, all of these different countries. And when they're here, as Loli said, once they're on employer-dependent permits, it is impossible to be able to assert your rights. This is really crucial. If you have a right, say, to decent wages, how are you going to speak up? Because when you speak up, your employer can fire you. They can make you homeless because you're kicked out of the country. They can make it so that you don't come back in the future. Exactly. You can't get employment insurance. So really, it's immigration laws that give employers the power to exploit people, and permanent resident status is the only solution to make it better.
In 40 years, no government in the province of Ontario ever used the notwithstanding clause of the Constitution to set aside constitutionally protected charter rights. But this government has done it a couple of times and tried to do it more than that. For those who believe that that is not consistent with democratic governance in the province of Ontario, what would you say?
Well, look, I'll say this. I know there's a lot of talk of the charter and what they envisioned when they brought it in. Look, when the charter was brought in, there were no cell phones. There were no computers in every home. Most Canadians didn't have cable TV. Most had one phone in their house. We still had smoking on planes and in restaurants. It is a very different time frame when the Constitution was drafted to where it is today. The courts weren't as active when the charter was brought in. So it is evolving. It is always evolving, but the system is there. There is a notwithstanding clause. The provinces have utilized that, but the courts have also stepped in when they have disagreed with a province's use of it, and that's where we're at today. So it is hard for me to hear sometimes when people say, well, you're using a constitutionally a provision in the Constitution, but it's not the way it was they considered it. Well, a constitution is not meant to be unamendable, unmovable. That's why they brought in the notwithstanding clause, and that's why provinces are using it, perhaps more often, but we have evolved so much since the 1980s. This is not, there was no such thing as social media back in the 1980s. Canada Post is how you communicated. I remember sitting in my living room with my family, having to call Italy, and you got 15 seconds on the telephone because it was so expensive. So things have changed so much. So, provinces are going to continue to use this, and the courts will continue to do their job in assessing whether it is the valid use of it.
Let's follow up on that. Peter Tabbins, I mean, it is a fair thing to point out that the Court of Appeal in Ontario just, basically overturned the Ford government's use of the notwithstanding clause. They said, not only do we disagree, but you can't use it going forward on this particular election expenses thing as well. Does he have a point that the clause is in there to be used and therefore governments are using it more?
I don't think he has a point, frankly. The understanding that I have is the clause was put in for very unusual and extreme situations, not meant to be used on a regular basis to deal with problems the government is facing on a day-to-day basis. Frankly, we've got a government that doesn't think that fundamental rights around electoral participation or bargaining are of consequence, and is quite prepared to use the notwithstanding clause to ignore any constitutional challenge.
Well, they tried to use it in the case of the labor negotiations, and then they stood down when they got heat.
Yeah, no, they got a huge amount of heat because people were outraged by it. And not just people in the trade union movement, people across the spectrum were saying, you've got to be kidding me. You're going to overturn these people's rights in this way without respecting what they fundamentally have a right to have access to. I think that the government is reaching on this. We're given all kinds of extraneous reasons as to why we should be able to use the notwithstanding clause. But if you actually respect the Charter and people's rights, This is not something that you use as casually as this government does. You use it in very limited and extreme circumstances. That's not the case here.
Let's remember that
Can I jump in, Steve?
Sure, go ahead.
Just very briefly. First, on the behalf of Mr. Callander, with all respect, you're on this panel, you're slightly outnumbered because you've got Janet Ecker, Steve Paikin, and me, who covered Bill Davis, the late Bill Davis, who spoke out against the charter. A great progressive conservative, I'm sure you'd agree.
Spoke out against the use of the notwithstanding clause.
Thank you. And the reason he didn't like the usage of it was it seemed like a trivial usage of it in the times that Mr. Ford has invoked it, as I'm sure you know. Look, there is a decent argument, an arguable case for having a notwithstanding clause. A great New Democrat, Mr. Tabbins, Alan Blakeney, fought strongly for letting the legislators have the final say. But in this case, what grates is that it's being used in an arbitrary way by the Ford government, in particular on third-party advertising, where the previous Liberal government had a very decent compromise on third-party advertising. Let's control it 6 months before an election. And the Ford government out of nowhere said, no, let's double that to 12 months. So everything is capricious in this particular discussion on the charter. And that's what I think is concerning for many people.
The underground economy, of course, referring to activities whose goal is, well, basically not to pay taxes. And then there is not paying taxes itself. So let's start there. Between 2014 and 2018, I'm told roughly $112 billion did not find their way into public coffers that should have. Why didn't it?
Well, that's a great question. That the number that you cite is something that we call tax gap analysis, which is simply an attempt to figure out, looking at, okay, how much tax money do we actually gather? And theoretically, how much money ought we to gather? And what is the difference between those two? And some of the reasons that we don't manage to collect all of those tax dollars would be things like economic activity that sort of goes unmonitored. So whether you call that the informal economy or the underground economy, but sort of the payment of wages, the purchase of materials, all kinds of things that happen, but that actually happen outside of sort of the formal reporting structures that would mandate that would say something about taxation.
And let me do a quick follow-up with you, because I suspect our viewers and listeners will remember the whole Panama Papers scandal and all of the untaxed money that was leaving the country. The assumption was that the Canada Revenue Agency would somehow change the way they do business to prevent all of that, or at least more of that, from happening. Have they, in fact, changed the way they do business to prevent all of that or more of that from happening?
Well, they've certainly received more resources. And since 2014, they've introduced a neat little thing to deal with international tax evasion, which is an incentivized snitch line. But generally, it's a very, very difficult thing to sort of contain. They have introduced sort of, I suppose, more monitoring, more auditing, and they've drawn on the information that was made available in the Panama Papers and others to sort of go after particular entities. So they've done a lot, but it's a very, very difficult thing to confront.
Okay, Vanessa, as we suggested off the top, there seems to be as much underground economy in this country as we spend on healthcare in the province of Ontario every year, and that's a lot of money, almost $70 billion. From your perspective as an anti-fraud consultant, how pervasive is this in the lives of most Canadians?
Well, I mean, if you're asking me whether most Canadians are engaged in money laundering, the answer is no. But really, I think the big issue is whether we're targeting the right kinds of people who are committing fraud, or who are, I think more importantly, also engaging in other kinds of activities related to money laundering that have real and significant political and social costs. Laundering funds from corruption, for example, capital flight coming to Canada, is a significant problem in that it has knock-on effects for Canadians who want to buy things like homes, for example. So the way that we're managing this problem, I think, does impact the lives of everyday Canadians.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you want to buy a home and there's low inventory somewhere because in part, not in whole, but in part, there's been capital flight from elsewhere. People see Canada as an attractive place and a safe place to park their money. That's going to impact the inventory available. That's going to drive up house prices. So people who want to buy homes and are unable to buy homes because they can't afford them are directly impacted.
Noah, is there a way for the average Canadian to insulate him or herself from becoming a victim of this kind of corruption?
Yeah, I think so. Firstly, I think you need to separate the innocent Canadians from the organizations, perhaps, that might engage in this kind of corruption. When we're talking about capital flight and that kind of thing, it's often not just people in their individual names that are investing in, for example, residential real estate. It might be done through shell companies, anonymous companies, with the very intention of disguising who that person is behind it. And so I think for the average Canadian, the way you really need to insulate yourself is that you have to be separated out from those shell companies, those anonymous companies.
Separated out means what?
So, for example, if we're going to go after the owners of those shell companies, I think we need ways in which we can hold organizations responsible that is very different from holding individuals responsible. And we have some of this in our legal framework, where kind of the responsibility of organizations versus individuals. But I think that's generally one of the ways that we can evolve in that way to protect innocent employees.
Mary, if I asked you the same question, the difference between the library of 25 years ago and today, what would you say?
I think it's the opportunity to be together, to commune. I think that social inclusion element, there aren't very many places left actually where people can come, gather, create, or just be in society. So that social inclusion component has changed, and we really have been able to develop our programs and services to meet those needs.
Shamaika, let me ask you about one of your previous experiences, because I gather you were involved in the redesigning of the Cosset Library in Memphis, and in doing so, you came to Toronto to check out what was happening in this city here. What did you see or learn about here that you brought to Memphis with you?
Oh, so much. I had a wonderful opportunity. The library project that we did here in Memphis, under the direction of Keenan McCloy, who's a phenomenal leader, the city mayor, in a national initiative called Reimagine the Civic Commons, afforded me the opportunity to come to Toronto in the middle of 2018. And we visited a number of places, not just libraries. We went to community centers, we went to parks. And of course, as someone who works for libraries, I had to sneak away and check out a couple of libraries. And so, one of the really interesting things that I saw, and Victor's already talked about this, is just the way that they were thinking about technology and how they were thinking about not only giving access to technology. Of course, you talked about green screens and various recording equipment, but also kind of providing access through technology. And what I mean by that is not just saying, hey, here's a range of things that we have in terms of computers and digital resources, but here's how you can use these things. Here's fundamental ways that you can use it to improve your life, to upskill, to learn a new hobby, to maybe change your job prospects. And so that was really interesting. Also, something that I really loved was, at the time, was an innovator in residence program that I really, really loved. And I saw this as a really interesting way of bringing the community in and really leveraging the knowledge and the strengths and the skills of the community and making the library a very relational place, not just a place where, hey, I come and I get a book and I leave, or I come and I attend the library program and I leave. But it's like, no, I'm going to actually bring something with me. I'm going to bring things that I'm passionate about. I'm going to share those in a public space like a library. And so we were able to use those things and really infuse a lot of that into the project that we did in Memphis.
Sabrina, let me pick up on that with you. If we were to go into the Blue Mountains Public Library in Thornbury today, what would we be able to do beyond just borrow some books?
Well, that's an excellent question. We have a creator space, which is what we call our maker space. Many libraries have these, and it is a place where you can come and play and explore and test out technology. So from little children being able to do animation programs to adults coming in and borrowing our professional videography equipment, whether it's a case where you want to do an ad for your business or you just want to have, a great family event. these are things that you can do in libraries today. Our coding programs are active for all children. And one of the speakers mentioned, these are the skills that we need to build in our citizenry. It's not just about fun and playtime. Sometimes it's a case where you want to test something out before you purchase it. Other times it's the only opportunity you have for economic reasons. But our society is requiring these aspects of digital literacy. So we're building these skill sets in our citizens. So hopefully we're building new job opportunities for adults, and certainly making sure that our youth are going to be strong employees of the future.
Vickery, when did the library become more than just about borrowing books?
Well, libraries have always been about that, to be perfectly honest.
About more than just borrowing books?
Just about borrowing books. You know, we've had, for instance, newcomer services in our libraries for many, many years. And this is where newcomer agencies come into the library. We have them in about 16 of our branches, and they support newcomers in making their way and integrating into Canadian and Toronto society. And so public libraries have been about that for a long, long time. We support all sorts of different literacies, financial literacy, digital literacy that we've been talking about. So the library's been about that for a long time. But certainly I think we think about books and we think about reading programs, we think about story times, which are all still the heart and soul of public libraries. But there's always been so much more going on. It's just that in recent years it's accelerated.
That's just some of what we covered this week. You can find more, including the full conversations, on our website, TVO.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda. And that's it for this Friday, March 17th, 2023. Monday, we'll find out why Pakistan is in crisis. Also, we'll look into what's prompted an exodus from Cuba over the past year or so. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Thanks for watching TVO and for joining us online at tvo.org. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.